am today specifically because of libraries, and particularly the Upham's Corner branch, which is in Boston. So libraries tell working class kids or poor kids that they matter. When you go into a library, you can read the same book as anybody else. It's there for you this entire world.
When I was a kid, my father would take us to the Flint Public Library every Saturday, and we just about lived in the children's section. Then, in my early 40s, when I decided to become a writer, I was naturally drawn to the library to write, and that's where all of my books are written. I go to the library to write. There's something about the energy there that I love, and it just makes me feel very good and very at home.
My school library was also a really important place, and my school librarian really She handpicked books that would really match the students' needs. And my mother died when I was young, and she knew just which books to give me to help me to really to grieve and to learn how to cope with such a serious problem like that. And when I wrote my first book, it came time to write the acknowledgments. And I thought to myself, well, who should I acknowledge? And I realized it was really the librarian in my life who hand chose the books for me. And so I acknowledged her in the book, and I hadn't talked to her in years because I had moved away from my hometown. So I called her up, I found her, and I called her up and I said, I don't think you'll remember me, but you really made me into a reader. And ever since then, I've talked with a lot of my old friends from my hometown, and whenever I say, you know, didn't that librarian really turn you into a reader? They all agree. It was just a gift that she had, and she shared with all of us. So I don't think I would be here today if it wasn't for the library system.
Now with the internet, I don't think I could write what I try to write. I really rely on reference materials at the library. You know, things, frankly, I'm sorry, the internet can't do it all. You actually need to go and pick a hard book off a shelf and sit down and look at photographs and read what's underneath them sometimes.
I use the library a lot in my actual work. I know that people don't necessarily think of books being set in the 70s and 80s as historical novels, but they are in a sense. Even if you've lived through those times as I have, your memory of them is not the most reliable guide. One of the things I started doing as I began broadening my scope as a novelist and writing these books that had much more complicated timelines and a lot of scenes set in other decades is I began going to the Pratt and reading magazines. And the thing that I found was that it wasn't so much the articles in magazines that were instructive about the times in which we lived in, but the advertisements. One story I like to tell is I just sat there one day at the Pratt, and this is so easily done at my hometown library. All of the magazines are there, they're bound, you can have them called up from the, I've just blanked out on what you call that place in the library where they keep everything in archives when they're on the floor.
Stacks?
The stacks, yeah, I had one of those moments. You can call to the stacks and very easily get whatever magazines you want from any time if they're not already out on the shelf. And I was writing a novel about a teenage girl who made a disastrous mistake when she was not even 15. And one of the things that I would not have remembered about the mid-1970s, when I was the exact same age as this girl, is that in 17 magazine there were ads for Hope Chest. And I don't think that's something that we recall about our culture in the 70s, that teenage girls still married, and it was not uncommon for a girl coming out of high school to have that as her goal or her ambition. And so that's just one example of the way that going to the Pratt, reading the magazines, I read newspaper archives all the time, and I can be quite precise about things when I want to. I also then say, well, I'm a novelist, I get to make stuff up. But every now and then there's like a moment of serendipity. I needed my two characters to go to the movies on a particular weekend, and I checked the movie listings, and I found out that the two side-by-side theaters were playing Escape from Witch Mountain, so the PG movie that you would expect two teenage girls to go see, but on the other side was Chinatown. And it was great for my purposes to have these girls buy tickets to Escape from Witch Mountain and sneak into Chinatown.
I owe libraries so much. I started reading at libraries. Of course, when I was little, I would get a huge garbage bag and take home an entire plastic bag full of books. And I also owe libraries for my newest novel because I wrote about the orphan trains, and I wouldn't have known about that whole historical era if it hadn't been for, I guess 5 or 6 years ago, I walked into my library and there was a huge display informing me about the orphan trains, and it was such an interesting poster board triptych educational thing that, so I went home and read about it, and it actually found its way into my newest novel. I probably check out, between me and my young daughter, I probably check out 250 library books a year, easily. I use it to research for my novels, I use it for pleasure reading, I use it for coming up with new ideas of kinds of things I want to write about, and I'm so grateful for libraries and librarians.